Welcome to the Play Their Way podcast, where we talk about all things in child first coaching. I'm your host, Laura Jane Jones, and today I'm excited to welcome our special guest, Skye Eddy. Welcome, Skye. Great to have you on with us. We've had a very international theme recently. We had a guest from Australia just last week, and now you're coming to us live from the States. How are you today?
Great. Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Interestingly, I was just in Australia doing some work with the New South Wales FA just last week as well. So that's great.
Well, I'm sat here in Old South Wales, so we're very international, very cosmopolitan on this podcast. Skye is the founder and CEO of Soccer Parenting, which recognises the huge role of parents and young children and young people's sporting experiences and the connection between all of those things. So, Skye, let's get started by perhaps you telling me a bit more about Soccer Parenting and why the organisation came about.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. So I founded Soccer Parenting with one real clear mission, and that was to make youth soccer, youth football better. Quite simply, I just saw a real need and the gaps that existed in the coach-parent relationship specifically, and the stresses that exist in that coach-parent relationship, which is often undefined. And so I really came about with this idea, with Soccer Parenting, with the idea to support, enhance, improve that coach-parent relationship, knowing that would lead to a better player experience as well.
On this podcast, we're often speaking to and about coaches, but how integral are parents to children's sporting journeys?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's impossible for us to say that we're trying to meet the holistic needs of players. Is it possible for us as coaches and as leaders of organizations to say we're trying to meet the holistic needs of players without recognizing that parents are a vital stakeholder to that process? So I would say vital is probably the best word there as far as how important they are.
One thing I want us to kind of get out the way early doors is that sometimes it feels like parents are vilified around organised sports, and we often see a narrative of pushy parents and shouty sideline mums and dads. But that's a minority, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that really is foundational to the work that I'm doing, is trying to help coaches and organizations understand and realize that the vast majority of sporting parents are level-headed and sometimes likely stressed, because the ecosystem that we've developed for children to participate in youth sports globally is a stressful situation, unfortunately, too often. So absolutely. And it's those irrational parents, is what I call them, that have sort of ruined it, because they're the ones that coaches have used as an excuse to push away parents and to say that they won't interact with any of them or prefer not to, or this lack of trust. And quite frankly, those irrational parents have ruined it for the level-headed ones as well, because as a level-headed parent, the last thing we want to be perceived to be is one of those pushy parents. And so we often don't ask questions or get curious enough about our child's experience in order to best support them.
Play Their Way is all about children's autonomy in sporting environments and recognising their own self-determination. But how can parents support this?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about self-determination theory, the research behind that, autonomy, confidence, relatedness, or connection, community, the parents supporting children and developing the sense of autonomy is so important. Whether it be really simple things like having your child be responsible for all their equipment, pack their own bag, get their own hydration, carry their own bag, whether it be simple things like that, or really on a larger scale, helping our child, encouraging our child to lead the way with their voice being heard and allowing their voice, bringing our child's voice into the conversation, into the narrative when it comes to us making decisions about our children in sport.
And I guess on this podcast, we've talked so much about children having that place in a sports environment to find their voice and make a choice, and it's all about their journey. But actually, we're thinking about things perhaps in the abstract, whereas what you're talking about is the very simple things of a child having their own self-determination when it comes to things like their kit, like their possessions. How important do you think sport is for teaching kids these tools that they're going to need in other aspects of life?
Yeah, when we give our children autonomy, and I say we, meaning collectively, when the adults give children autonomy, when they help them lead the way. I mean, this is why sports is such an amazing experience for children, has the potential to be, is because of these life lessons, the resilience, the sense of accomplishment that children can gain, and a deeper understanding about how to work hard, the sense of teamwork, connection to other individuals, establishing trust, being a leader, being a follower. I mean, all of these amazing life lessons are literally just sitting at the doorstep for children to learn through sport if the adults create environments that facilitate the learning of those lessons.
Is it difficult to manage that relationship between giving kids their own ability to make decisions, but also to maintain the role of being the authoritarian ultimately?
It's very difficult. I mean, sports parenting is really tricky, and it's something that we need to acknowledge as being difficult. And it's one thing that I really, in the work that I am doing now globally, is trying to help coaches and organizations truly understand and have some empathy towards being a sports parent. Because, you know, the idea of when to push and when to let your child lead the way, when to encourage them to meet the goals that they set and hold them accountable maybe to goals that our children set, but also let them learn tough lessons in not accomplishing goals and what we learned from that. I mean, there's so many nuances for parents that are very, very difficult. And quite frankly, there are very few organizations that are supporting parents and trying to give them more insight, more education around things related to the sporting experience of a child. Parents don't understand relative age effect. They haven't ever heard about concepts like functional movement skills or different things like this. So the onus is on organizations like mine, sports parenting and soccer parenting, and others, whether that be coaches or club leaders, to really kind of facilitate those conversations and help parents feel curious to learn more to support their child.
When we're talking about that kind of dichotomy relationship of authoritarian versus giver of autonomy, one of the things that parents are going to have to deal with is managing when perhaps on a Saturday morning they've got a young person, a child who doesn't want to go and play football because it's raining or because they just fancy playing on their games console that day. How do parents manage those moments of giving children self-determination and or self-authority, but also making sure that they are still participating?
Yeah, to be fair, honest, I don't think that would be I would hope that wouldn't be a hard decision for a parent. No, mom, I don't want to go play. It's raining. Okay, you made a commitment to your team. That doesn't matter. I mean, I think that from a parent's perspective, some decisions should be pretty easy. Whether or not the further situation that might progress down the road to that is, I don't want to keep playing. I don't want to try out for that team again, or I'm going to quit sport, and a parent's role in that situation. But I would hope that if a child has made a commitment to the team, that a parent is supporting that commitment by holding their child accountable to being an active participating member of that team. I would hope.
What you've touched on there is those conversations that we know happen where it's those prolonged, those week on week, I don't want to go, I don't like it. It's important for parents to be asking why and what is it you don't like. And when a child is telling us that perhaps it's the coach or the style of coaching that they're not enjoying, how difficult is it for parents to be an advocate for their children? And how important is it for them to show children how to advocate for themselves?
You hit the nail on the head with both of those things. So really at the core of everything that we're doing is at soccer parenting and sports parenting is encouraging coaches to establish trust and to rethink the relationship with a parent, and for coaches to be really clear on establishing what the boundaries of that coach-parent relationship looks like. And so if those boundaries are clear, one of the door open times that we talk about, meaning the door should be open between coaches and parents, and one of those key times is when there is a persistent lack of feeling of inspiration on the part of the child. When that is happening, a parent should 100% feel encouraged to go and talk to the coach, so the coach and the parent can come up with a strategy and a plan to keep the child involved in sport, to keep them motivated, to try to maybe shift that narrative of what's going on and when it comes to this feeling of inspiration. So absolutely, a parent should feel the door is open and that conversation is welcome between a coach when that is starting to happen. And the parent needs to dive into that as well with a child. Maybe they're not playing at the correct level. Maybe the environment the child's playing in is too difficult for them and it's requiring too much emotional energy and it's too stressful for the child, and really stepping them back to a more community-inspired level of football or sport might be in the best interest of the child. So it's really important that the parent, with no judgment, with really just trying to support child, with a number one perspective being keeping our children involved in sport, that a parent approach that conversation with a child that way. But if there are coach issues that are sort of persistently happening, that are making the child not enjoy the sporting experience, that's where club and organizational leadership really matters here. And I can't emphasize how much organizational leadership is important to this story as well.
One thing you talked about there was that lack of inspiration in the space. And it really made me think of one of our former guests on the podcast, the legendary Pete Sturgis, said that the most cutting thing he'd ever experienced as a coach was when a child said to him, "This is boring." Yeah. And it made him really rethink and reshape the session that they were doing. That's a child going to a coach. What do you do if your child comes home and says, "I've told the coach I don't like this, but he's still making me do it. She's still making me do it"? Yeah. How do you adjust and fit then?
Yeah. I was just with Pete Sturgis last week for an entire week. It was brilliant.
I'm so jealous. My favorite. I love Pete.
I mean, he is such a wealth of knowledge and clarity, and I just soaked up being around him for a week when we were together. So I had the chance to watch him do some field sessions and really bring this holistic concept right into a really clear vision on the field and what that looks like. And Pete and I discussed actually kind of the situation that you're talking about. How can parents continue to advocate for their child? And I do believe that bringing parents and giving parents more of a voice within the youth sporting ecosystem is a necessary step for us to improve the experience that we are giving children. So if, and this is where I founded Soccer Parenting. This is the exact moment you're talking about, is when I founded Soccer Parenting, is when my daughter, was coming home from her football, her soccer experiences, uninspired, and I went and observed training, and it was so boring. Like, I don't blame her for being bored, because the coaches weren't adequately supporting the inspiration of an 8-year-old child. And so what happened was I talked to the other parents just on a really low-key level to see how the other parents were feeling about the experience that their child was participating in. And this was a very well-known club, very well-run club, very professional looking club with beautiful fields and facilities, and all the parents were totally satisfied. And it struck me in that moment that until parents really understand what a good learning environment looks like for children, then we were never going to adequately be meeting their needs. And so that's really what drives me to this day, is helping parents understand what that looks like so that they can encourage and be a voice, an advocate for their child when it comes to their environment being one that promotes joy and inspiration and learning, and all the kind of ingredients that are so vital to our children having an experience that makes them want to continue to play, be active, participate.
One thing I find really interesting there is you're talking about yourself as an individual bearing witness to your daughter's sessions. And I think that's something that we're putting a lot of onus on kids when we're asking them to tell us what the problem is. We know if a child isn't happy, and they can verbalize to us, "I'm not enjoying it," but they can't always find the right tools to tell us what it is they're not enjoying. So why is it, or how is it important for parents to be there to make these things recognizable to themselves, so that if they feel their child isn't enjoying it or isn't perhaps deriving the outcomes that they were hoping that they would get from it, how important is it that parents are there witnessing that, because they know their children the best?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that parents witness it acknowledge it, validate these things, and then bring them forward. So the biggest thing that I hear from parents and in my work with coaches and clubs is that a coach's expectations for the environment and for the environment in terms of the oftentimes like the team needs to win feeling that the coach has is not aligned to the parents and to the players. So this whole concept of winning and development is really foundational to the conversation. I don't think we can kind of go on without bringing this concept of winning versus development forward. And this is where it gets really tricky. I mean, I said recently to a group, and there were sort of some jaw-dropped moments, is that I, as a parent, desperately want my children to desperately want to win every single time they get on that field to participate in a match. Of course, I don't want my child going out there like, I don't care what the result is today. I just want to develop. Like, kids aren't going to feel that. And we don't want them. We want sport to teach them to be competitive, to work hard, to never give up, to support their teammates when they're struggling. Like, this is where all the great lessons happen. And quite frankly, too often we get confused in this winning versus development. And what happens is that we focus too much on the results, not the actual effort to win. And that misalignment between coach and parents, and this is where it gets really confusing, because a lot of times coaches are saying, I don't really care about winning. It's the parents that are putting so much pressure on it and making me feel like the team has to win in order for their child to stay on the team. So this is why we need these conversations. This is why we need to bring forward this nuance of confusion that just way too often exists in youth sports. And we need to try to find language and words so that we can get ahead of it and discuss it as adults when it comes to really supporting children. It is a tricky, it's a tricky, or it doesn't have to be tricky. It's just not talked about enough, and we don't have clarity on the whole winning versus development narrative. And it's not that hard. We just need to put language to it and be clear on what we believe, and then follow through and really make it the culture within our sporting teams.
Do you think that coaches overlook the importance of parents? To kind of talk about it in a more jovial way, we look at the stereotype of soccer moms in the States and driving your big car and filling it with kids and buying kit and equipment. But the reality is that if you weren't doing that, there's no children participating, because parents are integral to making sure that their kids are there, they're dressed for it, they've paid their subs, they're involved. Do you think coaches overlook how influential parents can be to children in their sporting journeys?
I think many coaches do, and a lot of times that's understandable based on past experiences coaches have had with those irrational parents. But that's the work at hand, is to help us rethink the dynamic of that coach-parent relationship. So, if you look at your not their play their way survey that you did, but the coach's voice or the role of the coach feedback you got, I think it was that 66% of coaches are satisfied with their role and feel heard as a coach. But that means that 35% don't. And that's a really big gap. And I think it's those 35% of coaches, if they can open the door to parents and facilitate more trust-filled relationships with coaches and with the parents and the team, that it will help coaches feel more satisfied in their experience as a coach and potentially continue to participate and to work as a coach in the youth sporting environments. I also think that, best practices for parent engagement for coaches lead to parents that are empathetic. And, we want parents that are more empathetic towards coaches, yet we're keeping the barriers closed in that coach-parent relationship. So, 100%, is part of, the narrative of the work that we're doing, is to open up those relationships between coaches and parents, and to give coaches and sporting organizations the skills that they need in order to create a parent engagement plan that doesn't take a lot of effort on the part of the coach, but is highly effective when it comes to the coach's satisfaction in their job and the player's level of inspiration.
In an ideal world, what does the relationship between parent and coach look like for you?
That's a really good question. I think that in the ideal world, parents and coaches are working together to ensure players are inspired. So, because children are so different, because every sporting system is so different and every level of play is so different, what that working together looks like is a little bit up in the air. But I think we can settle on the concept of a trust-filled relationship, that the parents' needs are being met, the coach's needs are being met. Parents believe that the coach cares more about their child as a person than as an athlete. Coaches feel like they are respected and trusted, and like their efficacy, their ability to impact the lives of players, they're feeling a sense of inspiration themselves through that. But trust, I think, is foundational to all of this, and is when the relationship is a positive one. Without a doubt, there'll be trust between it.
You've talked about your own experiences as a soccer mum and watching your daughter go through sport. What's been the most transformational things that you've learned over the years in that position as the parent?
Yeah, I've been talking about this a lot lately. I've sort of coined this term of decoupling, and this is what I had to do as a parent. With my background as a former professional athlete, as an active coach, I'm a coach educator for U.S. Soccer, United Soccer Coaches, even with this big background that I have in the game, and I feel like I'm a really good parent just in general. Being a sports parent was really hard because I wouldn't say that I was living vicariously through my child, because I had already had my sporting experience. That was fine. I just cared too much about how my child was feeling deeply, and not enabling and allowing and giving her and my son, who was more of a community level player in sport, but not giving them their autonomy, not letting them just have this experience and go through the ups and downs and be there to support them through the ups and downs. I cared too much, especially about the downs and what my child might be feeling. So that was probably the number one thing that I did and went through. And believe me, this took years. This is the path of soccer parenting, but to sort of what I call decouple from my child and literally just be there to support and love and witness the joy of her and my son competing in sport, and not feel it so deeply.
Did you see a difference in your daughter as an athlete when you started to let go of the reins slightly and give her that autonomy in a football environment?
Absolutely. We have a course at Soccer Parenting and Sports Parenting called the Sideline Project, and one of the steps of those courses is to have a parent download question prompts to interact with their child around parents asking their child, how do you want me to show up to your match days, to your game days? And just facilitating and seeing the power of just even that conversation between a coach and a parent. 32% of parents who take the course say that their relationship with their child improved as a result of just really likely having this conversation with them. So absolutely, opening the door to parents and children engaging and interacting regarding their sports experience absolutely makes a great difference. I love to see my children continuing to participate in sport and feel inspired by it. That's I kind of say mission accomplished when it comes to my children and their youth sports experiences.
Well, mission accomplished on this podcast as well, Skye. This has been such an informative chat, and thank you so much for joining us from so far away this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, be sure to leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might like it too. And follow Play Their Way on social media, at Play Their Way on TikTok, X and LinkedIn, and at Play Their Way UK on Facebook and Instagram.